Be me, 34-year-old woman. Have dedicated my entire life to educating the unwashed masses. Have 3 degrees in gender studies, women's literature, and intersectional feminism. Spend most of my days writing blog posts that get dozens of likes from my fellow warriors. Also moderate several online feminist communities where I ban anyone who dares question my superior intellect. Live in a nice apartment that daddy helps pay for because the patriarchal job market refuses to properly compensate my expertise. Have been single for the past 6 years by choice, obviously. Men are intimidated by strong, intelligent women like myself. They can't handle someone who challenges their fragile masculinity. My younger brother Jake is coming over for dinner tonight. He's 26 and just got some job at a tech startup. Typical privileged male coasting through life on easy mode. I haven't seen him in about 8 months because I've been busy doing important activist work. Also because last time we talked, he said something problematic about personal responsibility. Had to educate him for 2 hours straight about how that's actually victim blaming. He just sat there nodding while I explained how the world really works. Probably felt embarrassed about his ignorance. Decide to make a vegan lasagna for dinner because I'm not contributing to animal oppression. Also pick up some locally sourced organic wine that costs $45 a bottle. Daddy sent me money for my birthday last month, so I can afford to treat myself. Jake shows up right on time, wearing a button-down shirt and jeans. Already annoyed because punctuality is a tool of white supremacist, capitalist culture. I read that in an academic paper, so I know it's true. He's also gotten in better shape since I last saw him. Probably spending all his time at the gym, engaging in toxic masculine fitness culture. Doesn't he know that exercise is fat-phobic? Give him a hug anyway because I'm gracious like that. He compliments my apartment, which is covered in protest posters and empowering quotes. I have a particularly good one about how all men are trash right above my couch. He looks at it for a second but doesn't say anything. Typical male, avoiding difficult conversations about his complicity and oppression. We sit down to eat, and I start telling him about my latest blog post. It went viral and got almost 200 shares. The post was about how air conditioning is sexist because office temperatures are set for men's comfort. I spent 3 weeks researching this, and the response has been overwhelming. Jake just says that's interesting and keeps eating. Can tell he's intimidated by my intellectual prowess. Ask him about his job because I'm a good sister who shows interest. He starts talking about some app they're developing. Something about helping small businesses manage inventory. Sounds boring and probably exploitative of workers. Interrupt to ask if they have mandatory diversity quotas in their hiring. He says they hire based on qualifications and try to get diverse candidates. Immediately go into lecture mode about how that's not enough. Explain that they need to actively discriminate in favor of marginalized groups. He asks if I mean discrimination or affirmative action. Tell him there's no difference and that positive discrimination is necessary to undo centuries of oppression. He just nods and says he'll think about it. Clearly won that exchange with my superior argumentation. Start telling him about the protest I organized last week. We were fighting against a new development that would bring jobs to the area. Those jobs would have been exploitative wage slavery, obviously. Better to have no jobs than bad jobs. That's what I always say. Also, the developers didn't have enough women and non-binary people on their board. I counted their website, and it was 67% men. Jake asks how the protest went. Well, we didn't stop the development, but we raised awareness. That's actually more important than material outcomes. Consciousness raising is the real revolution. He's looking at me with this expression I can't quite read, probably in awe of my dedication to justice. Decide to ask him about his dating life. He says he's been seeing someone for about 4 months. Immediately ask if she's a feminist. He says she cares about equality but doesn't really label herself. Red flag right there. Tell him that any woman who doesn't identify as feminist is suffering from internalized misogyny. She needs to be educated about her own oppression. He should send her some of my blog posts. Jake politely declines and says she's happy as she is. Getting frustrated now because he's clearly not taking this seriously. Ask what she does for work. She's a nurse, which is fine, I guess. But nursing is actually a field that perpetuates patriarchal caring expectations for women. Share this observation with Jake. He says she genuinely loves her job and helping people. Tell him that's because she's been conditioned by society. No woman genuinely enjoys traditional feminine roles. We've all been brainwashed by the patriarchy. Jake sets down his fork and asks me if I've ever considered that women have agency. Excuse me, what? He just questioned whether I believe women can make their own choices. Take a long sip of wine before responding. Explain very slowly that women do have agency, but their choices are constrained by patriarchal structures. Therefore, any choice that aligns with traditional femininity is actually not a real choice. It's a product of false consciousness. I learned this in my second year of gender studies. Jake has the audacity to say that sounds contradictory. He says if women have agency, then their choices are valid, even if I don't personally agree with them. Cannot believe what I'm hearing. My own brother has been radicalized by the manosphere. Ask him point blank if he's been watching those terrible YouTube channels. The ones with men who talk about self-improvement and going their own way. He doesn't answer directly, which means yes. Feel my blood pressure rising. Those channels are gateways to extremism. They teach men to hate women and reject feminism. Start explaining this to him in detail. Tell him about how I got 3 of those channels banned from the platform I moderate. Saved countless young men from being indoctrinated. Jake asks me if I actually watched any of their content before getting them banned. Of course not, I tell him. I don't need to consume hate speech to know it's harmful. Other feminists documented their terribleness, and that's enough evidence for me. He suggests that maybe I should examine primary sources before making judgments. Now he's really pushing it. Inform him that as a woman, I have the right to feel unsafe around content that questions feminism. My feelings are valid, and that's all the justification I need. Jake actually laughs. He laughs at me, asks me when I became so afraid of different perspectives. Says the sister he grew up with used to love debating and considering all sides. That was before I was properly educated, I tell him. Before I understood how the world really works. Now I know that some ideas are too dangerous to engage with. We need to protect people from wrongthink. He's shaking his head now. Says that I sound like the authoritarians I claim to oppose. How dare he? Stand up from the table because I need to pace when I'm this angry. Launch into a passionate speech about how you can't be authoritarian when you're fighting oppression. Censorship is only bad when it's punching down. When we silence oppressors, that's justice. And men are oppressors by definition. All men benefit from patriarchy. Even him, despite his protests. Jake calmly asks me to define patriarchy. It's obvious I sputter. It's the system of male dominance that pervades every aspect of society. He asks me to give specific examples from our actual lives, from our childhood and family. Try to think of examples. Well, Dad made more money than Mom. Jake points out that Dad worked 60 hours a week while Mom chose to work part-time. She wanted to be home with us more, and Dad supported that decision. That's not the point, I say. The point is that we live in a system that makes women's labor worth less. He asks if I think Mom's choice to prioritize time with us was invalid. No, but it was influenced by societal pressure. He asks what pressure specifically. Getting flustered now. Bring up how women are expected to be primary caregivers. Jake reminds me that Dad did plenty of childcare too. He coached our sports teams and helped with homework every night. Yes, but the mental load fell on Mom, I insist. Read about this concept last month. Women always carry the invisible burden of household management. He asks me to define mental load. Explain that it's all the planning and organizing that women do. He nods and says Mom was definitely more organized, but then asks if that's because Dad couldn't do it or because Mom preferred to do it her way. Remember how Mom used to joke about being a control freak about the house? How she'd redo things if Dad didn't do them exactly her way? That's not relevant, I tell Jake. He says it seems pretty relevant to the question of division of labor. If someone insists on doing things themselves, they can't complain about doing things themselves. That's victim blaming, I practically shout. He's now engaging in classic patriarchal gaslighting, making women responsible for their own oppression. Jake very calmly says he's not gaslighting anyone. He's just asking me to apply consistent logical standards. If women have agency, then they're responsible for their choices. If they don't have agency, then feminism is pointless because women can't choose liberation either. My head is spinning. There's something wrong with his argument, but I can't quite articulate what. Fall back on my training. Tell him he's saliening me, demanding emotional labor and explanation. It's not my job to educate him. He should do his own research. Jake says he has done research. He's read feminist theory, including the books I gave him years ago. He's also read critics of feminism. He's looked at statistics and studies from multiple sources, and he's concluded that modern feminism has some serious logical and factual problems. Cannot believe my own brother has become a misogynist. Tell him exactly that. He says disagreeing with feminism doesn't make someone a misogynist. He loves and respects the women in his life. He just doesn't accept an ideology that he finds intellectually dishonest. Intellectually dishonest. My entire field of study, my life's work. Intellectually dishonest. Demand, he explained himself. He takes a deep breath and starts talking. Brings up the wage gap, which he calls a myth. Says women earn less on average because of different choices, not discrimination. I try to interrupt, but he holds up his hand. Asks me to let him finish, then I can respond. Fine, I say, crossing my arms. He continues explaining how the wage gap disappears when you control for hours worked, for career choices, for continuous employment versus taking time off. Says there are studies showing childless women in their 20s actually out-earn men. I'm fuming, but waiting for my turn. He talks about how feminists claim women are oppressed in Western countries, while ignoring that men die younger, commit suicide at 4 times the rate, make up 93% of workplace deaths, are majority of homeless, majority of prisoners, doing worse in education at every level. Says if we lived in a patriarchy designed to benefit men, these outcomes wouldn't exist. Finally, he's done. My turn. Start by saying that all his statistics are taken out of context. The wage gap is real and documented. He asks me to provide sources that control for the variables he mentioned. Tell him it's not about variables. It's about the fact that women earn less, period. Why doesn't matter? He says, why absolutely matters if we're claiming discrimination. If women choose lower paying fields, that's not the same as being paid less for equal work. Those fields are lower paying because they're female dominated, I counter. He asks if I think teachers and nurses are poorly compensated. They make decent middle-class salaries with good benefits. Well, they should make more, I say. He agrees, many people should make more. But that's a labor issue, not a gender issue. Male teachers and nurses face the same pay scales. Move on to his claims about male disadvantage. Explain that men's problems are also caused by patriarchy. Toxic masculinity makes men not seek help for mental health. That's why they commit suicide more. Traditional masculine roles push men into dangerous jobs, so their workplace deaths are still patriarchy's fault. Basically, patriarchy hurts men too, but it's still a system that privileges them overall. Jake asks me if I hear myself. Says I'm using an unfalsifiable framework. Anything bad that happens to women is patriarchy. Anything bad that happens to men is also patriarchy. There's no possible evidence that could disprove my theory. That's not science or logic, he says. That's faith. Tell him that lived experience is more important than his so-called logic. Women know we're oppressed because we live it every day. He asks me to describe my oppression, specifically mine. Not theoretical women, but me personally. How have I been oppressed? Stammer something about microaggressions, about living in fear of male violence, about glass ceilings and societal expectations. He addresses each point, asks what microaggressions I've experienced recently. Struggle to think of concrete examples. Well, men interrupt me, I say. He points out that I've interrupted him multiple times tonight, that people interrupt each other regardless of gender, especially in families. That's different, I insist. Ask him about living in fear of violence. He says fear isn't the same as reality. Statistically, men are more likely to be victims of violence than women, except for domestic violence and sexual assault, which are serious problems. But problems that affect a minority of people, not all women. Most women will never experience these things. So living in constant fear isn't rational. It's cultivated by feminist rhetoric. Cannot believe he just said my fears aren't valid. Tell him he's invalidating my feelings. He says feelings can be valid but also irrational. I can feel afraid of flying, but that doesn't mean planes are dangerous. My fear doesn't reshape reality. Ask him about the glass ceiling. Surely he can't deny that women face barriers in advancement. He asks, what barriers specifically? Bring up how there are fewer female CEOs. He says there are also fewer male CEOs. Most men aren't CEOs either. The tiny percentage of people at the very top isn't representative of general gender dynamics. Also, women are more likely to start businesses now than ever before. If they're not advancing in corporate hierarchies, maybe they're choosing different paths. There's that word again. Choice. Tell him women's choices aren't free. We're socialized from birth to be accommodating and non-competitive. He asks if I think women are strong or weak. What kind of question is that? Women are strong, obviously. So strong women can't overcome socialization, he asks. Strong women are helpless victims of society. We're incapable of making authentic choices. We have no agency or willpower. That's not what I'm saying. He says it's exactly what I'm saying. I'm claiming women are simultaneously strong and capable, but also completely controlled by socialization. Men are apparently strong enough to overcome their socialization, since feminists expect men to unlearn toxic masculinity, but women can't overcome theirs. This is a double standard. It's infantilizing to women. My brain is working overtime trying to formulate a response. Tell him he's oversimplifying complex sociological concepts. He says maybe the concepts are overcomplicated to hide their logical inconsistencies. Bring up intersectionality, how oppression is multifaceted and overlapping, how you can't understand gender without race, without class. He agrees that people have complex identities, but says intersectionality as practiced just creates a hierarchy of victimhood, where everyone competes to be most oppressed, and the most oppressed person wins arguments by default. It's not about winning arguments, I say. It's about centering marginalized voices. He asks why marginalization makes someone more correct. A poor person isn't automatically right about economics. Being affected by something doesn't make you an expert on it. In fact, emotional investment often clouds judgment. That's why we have concepts like conflict of interest. Tell him that's privileged talk. Only someone who doesn't face oppression would say that. He points out, I just proved his point. I dismissed his argument based on his identity, not the content. That's ad hominem. It's lazy thinking. I'm educated in critical theory. I snap. I've studied this formally. He's just some tech bro who watches YouTube videos. He asks if credentialism is really my argument. Because appeal to authority is also a logical fallacy. Ideas should stand on their own merit. My degrees don't make me right. They just mean I've been extensively trained in one ideological framework. A framework he's arguing is flawed. So citing my indoctrination into that framework doesn't prove anything. Did he just call my education indoctrination? Tell him universities are places of higher learning, not indoctrination centers. He asks if I was ever exposed to non-feminist perspectives in my gender studies classes. Well, no, because they're gender studies classes. Exactly, he says. I spent years studying only one viewpoint, being taught by professors who all shared that viewpoint, reading only approved texts, writing papers that had to conform to feminist conclusions or else be graded poorly. That's indoctrination by definition. Protest that I learned critical thinking skills. He says, critical thinking means examining ideas from all angles, including criticisms. If I can't engage with anti-feminist arguments without calling them hate speech, then I haven't developed critical thinking. I've developed a defensive shield against having my beliefs challenged. Sitting back down now because my legs are tired. Feeling something uncomfortable in my chest. Not quite ready to call it doubt. Try a different approach. Ask him if he really doesn't think sexism exists. Of course it exists, he says. There are sexist individuals. There are some systemic issues, particularly in other countries. But the West is the most egalitarian society in human history. Women have every legal right men have, plus some additional protections and programs. If anything, current policies favor women. Like how he starts asking, scholarships specifically for women, diversity hiring initiatives, women's only networking groups and programs, lower standards for women in military and police, massive funding for women's health versus men's, domestic violence services almost exclusively for women, even though men are victims too, criminal sentencing, where women get significantly lighter sentences for the same crimes, family courts that heavily favor mothers. He goes on and on. Every point delivered calmly with examples. Try to argue that these things are necessary to counteract historical oppression. He asks when we're allowed to say we've achieved equality. What's the end point? Do we need 50-50 representation in everything? Because that's not how interests distribute. Men and women have different average preferences. This is observable across cultures. Even in the most egalitarian countries, the gender differences in career choice increase, not decrease. Because when people are free to choose, they often choose differently. Tell him that's biological essentialism, a tool of the patriarchy to keep women in traditional roles. He says it's just observable reality. Things like the gender equality paradox are well documented. In Norway, which has extensive gender equality policies, nursing is 90% female. Engineering is 90% male, more skewed than in less equal countries. Suggest maybe that's because of residual sexism. He says, or maybe men and women generally want different things. Maybe equality of opportunity doesn't produce equality of outcome, and that's fine. Forcing equal outcomes, despite unequal interests, is authoritarian. Ask him if he's saying women are naturally suited for certain roles. He says individuals vary enormously. There are brilliant female engineers and nurturing male nurses, but population-level averages show different distributions of interests and abilities. This isn't sexist, it's statistical reality. Denying it doesn't help anyone, especially doesn't help the individual women and men who don't fit stereotypes. My head is pounding. Finish my glass of wine and pour another. Notice Jake has barely touched his. He's just sitting there looking calm and collected, while I'm increasingly agitated. I hate that he's making me feel this way. Try to regain the upper hand. Tell him about my own experiences of sexism, how men have talked over me in meetings, how I've been called difficult for expressing opinions, how I've felt excluded from male-dominated spaces. He listens patiently, then says he doesn't doubt I've had those experiences, but asks if I've considered alternative explanations. Maybe people talked over me because I was rambling, not because I'm a woman. Maybe I was called difficult because I was being difficult, not because I'm a woman. Maybe I felt excluded because I was being exclusionary, not because others were. He says I have a tendency to attribute everything to gender, to see discrimination where there might be other factors, including my own behavior. This is gaslighting, I say, textbook gaslighting, making me doubt my own perceptions. He sighs and says that's not what gaslighting means. Gaslighting is deliberately manipulating someone to make them question their sanity. He's just offering alternative perspectives. If I'm so certain I'm right, then his questions shouldn't threaten me. The fact that I keep avoiding engaging with his points, and instead accuse him of various forms of abuse, suggests I'm not confident in my position. I'm confident, I say. I've dedicated my life to this. He asks if maybe that's the problem. I've invested so much identity into being a feminist, into being a victim of patriarchy, that I can't examine it objectively. My entire self-concept depends on this narrative. Admitting it might be flawed would mean admitting I've wasted years, that my degrees are in pseudoscience, that my activism has been counterproductive. So instead, I double down. I attack anyone who questions it. I ban dissent. I retreat into echo chambers. This isn't about me, I say weakly. It's about justice. He asks what justice I've actually achieved. What concrete improvements have resulted from my activism? Think about the protests and the blog posts, the online arguments and the call-outs. What have I actually accomplished? Raised awareness, I say. Awareness of what he asks. Problems that I can't prove exist using consistent logical standards. Problems that rely on unfalsifiable theories and cherry-picked statistics. Meanwhile, he continues, men's rights activists at least focus on concrete issues. Suicide rates, homelessness, criminal sentencing disparities, parental rights. These are measurable problems with specific policy solutions. Modern feminism just complains about microaggressions and socialization, about abstract concepts that can never be resolved, because resolution would end the grievance. And the grievance is the point. Tell him men's rights activists are just misogynists. Everyone knows that. Everyone in my circle, he corrects, which is a curated echo chamber. I've never actually investigated men's rights issues. I just accepted the feminist characterization, just like I did with those YouTube channels. I ban and block anything that contradicts my worldview, then claim I'm educated and informed, but I'm actually profoundly ignorant. Willfully ignorant. That's not true, I protest. He asks, when was the last time I read something that challenged my beliefs? Really read it with an open mind. Can't remember. When was the last time I changed my mind about something important? Also can't remember. When was the last time I admitted I was wrong? Never, because I'm fighting for justice. You can't be wrong when you're on the right side of history. He says, the right side of history is a meaningless phrase. Every ideologue thinks they're on it. It's not an argument, it's a thought-terminating cliché. Ask him when he became so cynical, so opposed to fighting for a better world. He says he's not opposed to making things better. He just thinks modern feminism makes things worse. It doesn't help women. It encourages them to see themselves as victims, to blame others for their problems, to expect society to accommodate their feelings. This doesn't create strong, capable women. It creates entitled children in adult bodies. Like me, he doesn't say, but clearly implies. Feel tears starting to form. Will not cry in front of him. Tell him he's being cruel. He says he's being honest. Cruelty would be letting me continue in delusion, watching me waste my life on pseudo-intellectual activism, becoming increasingly bitter and isolated, driving away anyone who won't validate my victim narrative. He's trying to help me even though I don't see it yet. Don't need his help, I say. My life is fine. He looks around my apartment, at the protest posters and the empowering slogans. Asks if I'm happy. Of course I'm happy. Am I, though? When was the last time I laughed genuinely? When was the last time I enjoyed something without analyzing it for problematic elements? When was the last time I had a relationship that wasn't based on shared grievance? My friends and I bond over complaints about men, about microaggressions and patriarchy. Every conversation is a competition of who has it worse. We validate each other's victim status. Is that friendship or mutual enablement? Tell Jake he doesn't understand. Being woke is seeing the truth. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, he says, or I've been trained to interpret everything through a distorted lens, taught to find offense in the innocuous, to attribute malice to the mundane. This doesn't make me enlightened. It makes me paranoid and miserable. Not miserable, I insist. He asks about my relationships. 6 years single by choice, I say. He asks if I've actually chosen to be single, or if I've made myself undateable with my ideology, constantly finding fault with men, treating every interaction as a power struggle, seeing sexism in normal human behavior. What man would want to deal with that? I wouldn't, I say. I don't need male validation. Everyone needs human connection, he counters. Intimacy and partnership. Pretending not to is just sour grapes. Calling it empowerment doesn't make loneliness feel better. I have my community, I say. Online forums and activist groups. He says online communities aren't real. They're performance spaces where everyone competes for woke points, where I can ban anyone who challenges me. That's not real connection. That's curated isolation. Think about my moderator duties. How much time I spend banning people, removing posts, calling out problematic behavior. Is that building community or enforcing conformity? Jake keeps talking, says he used to admire me. When we were younger, I was curious and thoughtful. I questioned things and formed my own opinions. Then I went to university. Came back different, angry and rigid, speaking in slogans instead of ideas. He's watched me become increasingly extreme, cutting people off for minor disagreements, seeing enemies everywhere. He's worried about me. That's why he came tonight, even knowing we'd argue. Because I'm his sister and he loves me, even though I probably think love is a patriarchal construct designed to oppress women. Laugh, despite myself. It's a bitter laugh. Tell him I don't think that. Not exactly. He smiles a little. Asks if I'm willing to consider that maybe some of what I believe is wrong. Not all of it necessarily, but some. That my framework might be flawed. That my education might have been more indoctrination than enlightenment. Don't know what to say. Everything feels uncertain suddenly. My whole adult identity is built on this foundation. If it's wrong, then what am I? Who am I? Jake seems to sense my crisis. Says I don't have to figure it all out tonight. Just consider the possibility. Actually engage with ideas I've been avoiding. Read the critics I've dismissed. Examine my own logical consistency. Think about whether my activism has made me happier or more miserable. Whether it's helped anyone or just created division. We sit in silence for a while. Finish my wine. He finally breaks the silence. Says his girlfriend would like to meet me sometime. If I can avoid telling her she has internalized misogyny. Almost defend myself. Then realize that's exactly what I would have done. Tell him maybe. No promises. He says that's fair. Helps me clean up dinner. We work in silence. It's not uncomfortable exactly, just heavy with things unsaid. At the door, he hugs me, tells me again that he loves me, that he wants me to be happy. Really happy, not performatively happy. Watch him leave from my window. Look around my apartment. Really look at it. It's like a shrine to grievance. Every poster is about fighting or resisting, about smashing or dismantling. Nothing is about building or creating. Nothing is joyful. Sit on my couch under the men or trash poster. Think about my life. My days are spent looking for things to be offended by, finding evidence of oppression, arguing online with strangers, banning people from forums, writing blog posts that my echo chamber applauds. Is this meaningful? Is this fulfilling? Or is Jake right? Have I made myself miserable in pursuit of ideological purity? Think about my degrees. Years of studying one narrow perspective. Professors who all agreed with each other. Papers that had to reach predetermined conclusions. Was that really education? Or was it what Jake said? Indoctrination. Feel something cracking inside. Not ready to call it my worldview, but something. Remember who I used to be. Before university. Before feminism became my whole identity. I was curious about everything, loved debating from all sides, had friends across the political spectrum, dated without analyzing every interaction for power dynamics. Was I happier then? Maybe. Probably. But admitting that means admitting I've been wrong. For years, that I've wasted my 20s and early 30s on ideology that doesn't hold up to scrutiny, that my expertise is in pseudoscience, that my activism has been counterproductive. Can't face that tonight. Pour another glass of wine, open my laptop, start to go to my usual forums, hesitate. Instead, search for some of the things Jake mentioned. Gender equality paradox, sentencing disparities, workplace deaths. Find studies and statistics from sources I would normally dismiss as biased. But what makes my sources less biased? Just because they confirm what I already believe. Spend hours reading things that contradict my worldview, finding it harder to dismiss. The arguments are logical. The data is compelling. Can't find good feminist rebuttals. Just accusations of misogyny and demands for sources to be dismissed. Exactly what I do. Sun is coming up. Haven't slept. Laptop is full of open tabs. Head is full of uncomfortable thoughts. Maybe Jake is right. Maybe I've been wrong. About a lot of things. Don't know what to do with this realization. My whole life is built on this ideology. My education. My career, such as it is. My community. My identity. If I'm not a feminist activist fighting the patriarchy, then who am I? Just a 34-year-old woman. Single and childless. Living in an apartment daddy pays for. With degrees in pseudoscience. No real skills. No meaningful relationships outside my echo chamber. No accomplishments except blog posts and banned users. This is too much. Close the laptop. Take down the Men Are Trash poster. Just that one for now. To stare at the blank space on the wall. It looks better. Cleaner. Less hostile. Maybe I'll take down more tomorrow. Maybe I'll read more. Actually engage with ideas I've been avoiding. Maybe I'll call Jake. Tell him he made some good points. Not that he won because this isn't a competition. Except it was. And he did win. Outsmarted me with logic and facts. While I relied on slogans and accusations. He stayed calm while I got emotional. He engaged with my points while I dismissed his. He treated me with respect even as he dismantled my worldview. While I called him names and accused him of gaslighting. He was everything feminists claim men can't be. Rational and empathetic. Strong and compassionate. Meanwhile, I was everything I claimed to be fighting against. Emotional and illogical. Authoritarian and closed-minded. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so humiliating. My younger brother, the one I used to lecture, just completely destroyed my entire ideological framework. Shown me to be a fraud. An emperor with no clothes. And I can't even be mad at him. Because he did it out of love. Trying to save me from my own delusion. Whether I can be saved remains to be seen. But tonight, for the first time in years, I have doubts. Real doubts. Maybe that's progress. Maybe that's the beginning of actually thinking critically. Instead of just claiming to go to bed as sun rises. Exhausted. Humiliated. But somehow, also relieved. Like maybe I can stop performing now. Stop being constantly outraged. Stop seeing enemies everywhere. Maybe I can just be a person again. Not a feminist warrior. Just me. Whoever that is. You have to figure that out. But not today. Today I just need to sleep. And tomorrow, maybe I'll start asking real questions. Instead of just providing approved answers.